Hi everybody, so like Jess just said, I'm going to be chatting about how to set up juniors and all of your teams for success. Even if you're not in a position where you hire juniors, or you're not in a team that has juniors at the moment, or you are a junior, there is still a lot of, hopefully a lot of nuggets of wisdom that you can get from this talk as well. So hi, I'm Hayley. I'm the tech lead for SheCodes Australia. Who here has heard of SheCodes? Yes! Oh my God, Sarah. So we've got 3 alumni here, and Sarah's like, what's SheCodes again? So SheCodes, for anybody who haven't heard of us, we are focused on upskilling women and non-binary folk to help them get into the tech industry. So we run a wide range of programs, ranging from like one-day workshops or one-week tasters to like full-on 6-month boot camps to help get women and non-binary into tech. And my job at SheCodes is I write all of those workshops and deliver most of those workshops and manage the army of mentors who also help deliver those workshops as well. But I haven't, like SheCodes Australia is just like the last couple years that I've been doing this. I've actually been teaching people how to code for like 8 or 9 years because I started coding in early high school, and I started teaching workshops about how to program in late high school. And in fact, in my very first class was one of my programming teachers from my school who went there for like professional development and didn't realize that I was leading the class. So I've been doing this for quite a while. I'm pretty experienced at interacting with people who are like brand new to the tech industry, and I would like to share some of that knowledge with you, and all those things that I've learned along the year, along this journey, I hope to be able to share with you. So just a little disclaimer. So all of this just comes from my experience and from anecdotal evidence and from all my interactions with working with people new to the industry. But as I was putting together this talk, I actually spoke to quite a few different junior developers in our Perth community to ask them about their experience about getting into tech at the moment. So all of this comes from like totally real experiences that I've been through, and also a bunch of juniors that I've taught have been through as well. But you know, take it all with a grain of salt, figure out what tips make sense for you and that you could apply in your job, because this is all going to be like the ideal process for getting juniors into your team, but obviously all your teams are different and the way you work is different. So we're going to go over in this talk your role as a mentor, so what that actually looks like mentoring a junior, how to be an effective mentor, how you can work as a team to support a junior, and why you should hire a junior developer. But hopefully the top 3 points are going to convince you by the time we get there, but just in case they don't, we're going to go through a few points of why it's so great to work with juniors. So just to start, I would like to clarify any misconceptions about who is a junior developer and what that title actually means. So some people think that junior developer, they think of like the 22-year-old coming out of university, but that's just one case. There is a bunch of different pathways to get into tech, and I'm sure that everybody here took a different pathway. So you might have gone to university or TAFE, or you might be self-taught, or you might have done a boot camp, or you might have done a mixture of all of those things. You might have got into tech when you were 16 or when you were 37, or you might have been an accountant for 20 years and then pivoted into some other job and then pivoted into tech. Like there's a lot of different pathways in here. So a junior developer is not one person who's just finished their degree at uni. It's someone who's just fresh to our industry and is ready to learn and needs some mentorship from more senior or more experienced developers to help them get started on their journey. So with that in mind, your role as a mentor can take many different forms. And being a mentor could mean many different things as well. So you might be a mentor in the sense that your team has just hired a junior who you're working with every day to help upskill them. Or maybe you have a one-on-one with a junior in a different team in your company every couple of weeks to see how they're going. Or maybe you meet with somebody who you met at Fenders and you're helping mentor them to get their first role in tech. Or maybe you go to a one-day workshop for SheCodes and help us mentor just the general public who are interested in finding out what coding is, and it's their very first day coding for the first time. Mentorship can look like a lot of different things. All of those are, you'd still be considered a mentor in my eyes. But as a mentor, no matter what the format is and no matter how often you're seeing them and what you're actually doing, your role is still the same and your job is still the same as a mentor. So your job is to help the person you're mentoring discover ideas and solve problems for themselves. So when someone asks you a question when you're mentoring, your job isn't just to tell them the solution. Your job is to help them figure it out. So we're going to go through how you could do that and what that actually looks like in practice. But the main thing to realize is as a mentor, you're not just taking someone's laptop and fixing it for them and giving it back. You're helping them figure out things for themselves and helping them learn what it actually means to be a programmer and how to think the way we think as programmers. So with that in mind, let's go through a few points of how to be an effective mentor. So this is the first tip that I give every single one of our mentors that comes to SheCodes workshops, and it's probably the one that mentors struggle with the most, and that is mitts off keyboards, which means that no matter how painful it is watching a student struggle to go to line 13 to get rid of that extra full stop that they've put there, you just have to keep your mitts off their keyboards. It's more valuable for them to go through the process of trying to figure out what line numbers actually mean, and that you're talking to about the second full stop that's the extra way along. Like it doesn't matter how frustrating it is, it's more valuable for them to go through that process of figuring that out for themselves rather than you just fixing it for them. It's about learning the syntax of the language, because to us, if you're a full-time JavaScript developer, you just look at JavaScript and you don't even think about it anymore, where the parentheses should go and where the full stops should go and all that. But to a junior, none of that makes sense just yet. So helping them go through that process of figuring out where they went wrong and figuring out how to navigate their code editor, way more valuable than you just doing it for them. The second one that mentors also really struggle with is the idea of balance the need to know versus nice to know. So this is the idea of providing information at just the right time and not using any more technical words than you need to when you're answering a question. So sometimes juniors ask me questions like that I'm teaching in a SheCodes workshop, for example. They'll ask me a question and they'll use a really technical word, but they don't know that they've done it. Or they don't know that they've actually just managed to string that sentence together and it actually did make sense, but they don't realize that they actually asked me like a super technical question. So rather than going into a super in-depth answer, I'm gonna ask them some more questions first to work out, did they actually mean to ask me that? Do they know what they're asking? And I'm gonna give them the answer that is the most suitable answer for them. Along these lines is also if you are mentoring a junior, but you're working with another senior developer that you know really well, around the junior is not the time to like have those really in-depth technical chats about stuff you're doing at work. Like that can be really intimidating as a junior and a little bit scary when you hear way more experienced developers say all these really technical words and you know they look like they know what they're talking about, even if you're just bluffing your way through that conversation, like they don't know. So you know for example, at a workshop where people are looking at how to code for the very first time, it's just not the time to have those chats with your dev friends, like do it somewhere else. And likewise, if you've got a junior who's really fresh to your team, you know, balance how much information you're going to throw at them on their first 3 days, because how much could they possibly take in? And the answer is probably not much because it's their first 3 days. So don't have those really in-depth chats and don't answer those really technical questions, like if it's just not the right time. Like save those for later. And with that in mind, my next tip is to ask questions. So like I said earlier, if they ask you a question and you're like, I don't know if they meant to ask me that, or I don't know if they actually know what they're asking, then just ask them some questions back to figure out what it is that they're actually wanting to know. And also, if they're asking you how to solve a particular problem, so if they're showing you their laptop and they're like, I just don't understand where this bug is coming from, then ask them some leading questions to help them figure out where to go. So instead of just tell them, hey, go to this tab now, look at this file, go look at this line. Okay, cool, now go to your browser and open the inspector. Just ask them some leading questions to help them figure out where they should go for themselves. Likewise, ask them some leading questions of, oh, why do you think it's doing that? How do you think that this got here? Have you seen this kind of error before? Do you know what that means? Rather than just telling them, ask them to start like thinking about it for themselves. And again, that's way more valuable than just taking the laptop and doing it all for them. It's way more valuable to try and help them start thinking and solving these problems for themselves, even if it is super frustrating and you can see it right in front of you. With that in mind, also consider frustration versus fun. This is for the mentee, not for you. So you're allowed to be frustrated, but if the person you're mentoring is getting really frustrated and they're just not making progress and they've been stuck on this thing for 3 hours and you're like rubbing your hands like, oh, what could I get them stuck on next? Like that's no longer fun. Like learning when you're angry and annoyed and just want to throw the computer out, like that's no longer a fun experience, that's just a frustrating experience, and you've limited how much someone's willing to take in or able to take in when they're in that mindset. So, you know, push them as far as you can until it just starts getting frustrating, and then help them out and give them a little bit more of a solution than you would have otherwise. And finally, be flexible. So the way that everybody learns is very different, and that unfortunately might not match the way that you learn. So your job as a mentor is to match the learning style of the person that you're mentoring. So I, for example, am a very visual person, so I like diagrams and I like drawing on whiteboards. Other people need to read it, so they like to see blog posts or long tutorials. Other people like to listen, so a talk on YouTube or something might be the solution. So your job as a mentor is to figure out which way the person you're mentoring seems to learn and match their style. And if you can't do that, then meet in the middle or find somebody else who could answer the question instead. Because if your teaching style doesn't match their learning style, then it's not going to be a very valuable conversation anyway. Oh, and finally, time boxing. This is a tip that I threw in yesterday, which I thought was really useful. So when I was a junior, oh my gosh, I'm so bad for this. I would just like solve a problem and just want to solve it, you know, and you get stuck on the same thing for 2 days. But if you had just gone and asked somebody else, maybe in the first 20 minutes, they could have given you enough of a hint that you could have solved it in 1 day instead. Unfortunately, when you're a junior developer, or when you're just getting started with a framework or a language that you haven't seen before, how do you know how long to time box something for? Like figuring out even that can be really difficult. So your job as a mentor could be to help your junior say, okay, I think you should give this 20 minutes, and after that come talk to me. Or I think you should give this 2 hours. Or I think you should give this the whole morning and then come and talk to me. So like over time, you could remove that kind of advice and hopefully they'll start to do it for themselves. But especially when someone's just getting started, time boxing is such a useful skill, you know, that I'm sure a bunch of you still do as well. Like I still do this. But just as a mentor, take the charge of like allocating how much time that should be time boxed for. So those are all tips that you could do as an individual to support a junior in any capacity. And then on the flip side, there is a lot that you could do as a team, so as a whole development team to help a junior as well. So this is I've broken this into 2 stages. So one is the onboarding process and one is just the day-to-day. So for onboarding, I compiled a bunch of these tips through wild assumptions that I'd made, experiences that I've been through, and also from talking to a bunch of junior developers. And these were the top tips that came out of this. And this one just blew my mind. So for onboarding, have a list of tasks ready to go. And the reason that this blew my mind is because of the number of people who came back to me who said this didn't happen. And onboarding was really wild. And it was just kind of like an email from the CTO or an email from another senior, or I just had to go over to walk over to somebody's desk and ask them what I was meant to be doing. Like, to me, this seems like an absolute no-brainer. You should have a list of tasks ready to go for them to get started on. And this could definitely be useful for anybody joining your dev team, not just a junior. And the list of tasks could vary in what's on there. And this could literally be like the whole first week of the job. So examples of stuff that would be great to have on there, like go say hi to everybody on the team. Make sure you have access to all of these things. Okay, we use this framework here, so go and do this tutorial. We use this language, go and do this tutorial. This talk explains this concept really well. Go and watch that. Cool, now that you've done these things, go and ask this person this question. Schedule a meeting to go and get this thing explained to you. So just have a really long list of tasks for them to gradually work through one by one so that they feel like they've got direction for their first few days, but also it becomes like a series of tiny wins. Like checking the little checkbox on a checklist like feels really good. Like everybody loves that feeling. So it'll just hopefully improve morale and make them feel productive for the first week. And also means that you're not going to spend your week answering emails or Slack messages or sitting right beside them telling them what to do next. So it's going to make your whole week more productive for you and for them. And leading on from that, make sure you have a checklist of things that they need access to. So anybody joining your team, they don't know all the services that you use. And if you sit down over the next week and start writing out all the things that you've logged into, all the web pages you've opened recently, you'll realize that this checklist could actually be ridiculously long. So just have that ready. Just have that ready to go. Don't leave it on the junior to, 3 months later to be like, oh, I never got a password for that thing. I can't actually log in. I can't actually use that service. Like do this from day one, set up all the things, ask them to go and log into all of the things on this list and make sure that it works. And again, this is going to save you a lot of emails or Slack messages or someone coming over to your desk and tapping you on the shoulder. Have a buddy system. So I think it's super valuable, and this is Everybody has different opinions about this, so it's up to you to figure out what works for you and the person that you're onboarding. But a buddy system is really great to just like assign the new person joining your team, like someone who they can go and talk to. So someone who they're introduced to like as soon as they arrive, and someone who they know this is the go-to person for the first little while of when I need something. Even better if you've got two buddies, because you know people have holidays and are sick and work different hours. But basically the idea of this is just, this is the go-to. So if someone needs a concept explained to them, they need help debugging their code, or they need their code review done or something or other, the buddy is the person that they can go to first. And that buddy doesn't have to solve all of those problems and answer all those questions. They just have to be the touch point to figure out who could do all of those things. So, you know, just create like a safe little environment and a safe person for this new person joining your team to go to. And on that note, that buddy shouldn't be their manager, because who wants to go to their manager like relentlessly for the first 3 months saying, I'm stuck again, I'm stuck again, I'm stuck again. Like that's not a fun experience. So this should be someone who is definitely, well, hopefully not their manager, so they don't have to feel like they're being judged or scared to go and ask for help in case the manager's noting that down again, oh, they're stuck again. Like nobody wants to have that feeling. Provide context. This is particularly important if you're a product team. So even though you might be working on one tiny little piece of this product in your team, or you might have given your new onboarding person like one little card to work on, like understanding the bigger picture is a lot more valuable than you might realize. But this can go both ways. On the one hand, you don't want to explain absolutely everything, because then that's just going to get overwhelming and that's going to become counterproductive. But at the same time, you have to explain enough that they have like an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. So at the very least, if they've given a card or a particular task to do, help them understand where that does fit in to the bigger picture, so that they can see like the flow-on effects from completing this card or completing this task. Like what's the result? What's the positive result of doing this? So just so they have meaning and understanding for the work that they're doing. So that's all for onboarding. And then for day-to-day tips, and make this like adaptable to like suit your team and to suit the person that you're working with. But I would personally recommend regular catch-ups with a mentor. And this could take many different forms. Again, this shouldn't be a manager, because if they have an issue, they might want to raise that with someone who they're not scared is marking their job performance, or maybe they have an issue with their manager, I don't know. But it should just be someone who they can just talk about their job with, like in a casual, like very relaxed environment. And these catch-ups, again, you'd have to work out what works for you and the junior, because everyone's different. But I would recommend using this as a place of, hey, for the next week, write down all the things that you think you're struggling with, but you don't need help with immediately, and let's go over the top 3 in our catch-ups. And chances are by the time you get there, they'll figure them out anyway, but it gives it some kind of structure or something to go on. And then as time goes on, these catch-ups might become less frequent or just less required, or they might change. But I would definitely recommend from day one having something like this scheduled, again, to provide like structure and direction, and just to like allocate a productive time to solve particular problems. Like again, it could just be like the top 3 things that you had issues with from the last week that you want to talk about. Provide a clear pathway. So the title of junior is like somewhat arbitrary and somewhat self-assigned. So the idea of providing a clear pathway is, you know, have a pathway of, okay, at this point, like maybe you're not a junior anymore, or maybe we're going to stop calling you a junior, or maybe you've reached some other level, or just a way to say you've made some progress here. So figure out some milestones for your junior to meet, so that they can feel like they are making progress in their career. Because when you first get started, hopefully you all remember when you first joined this industry or you first started doing this kind of job, you just feel like you're blocked all the time and you just need help all the time. And that feeling like takes a really long time to like, well, it never really goes away, but it takes a really long time to feel comfortable with that. So if you provide a pathway of like milestones of, yeah, you've clearly made some progress here, then that's just a really good feeling for everybody, and especially for that person who every day feels really blocked. If they know that, man, I felt blocked every day for the last month, but look at this thing that I just achieved because I managed to pick up this kind of card, or I managed to solve this kind of problem, or I did this kind of tutorial and I didn't need help with it, like that's a really great feeling. And also a really great way for you to measure their progress as well, so that you can see that they're actually improving too. Be understanding. So there are a lot of extra skills that go along with being a developer, especially if you're joining a really big team. So understand all the things that this person is going to be learning. Like the idea of picking up a card from your Kanban board or whatever and moving it to production, like once you've been sitting in a dev team for 6 months, that's just second nature and you don't think about that anymore. And if you've been in 7 different dev teams, then you probably don't think about it anymore. You're like, cool, what's your system? Awesome, sweet, I'll follow it, done. But if this is your first time joining a dev team, the stuff is just not second nature. This stuff is, like nobody's born with these skills or this knowledge. So be understanding that every single little piece of work is gonna have some blockers like that. Another really big one is navigating a large code base for the first time is really, really challenging. And there's a whole bunch of skills that you have to learn to go along with that, such as like efficiently navigating your code editor. Like again, no one's just born with those skills. That's not just second nature. It's something that we practice and we get good at over time. So be understanding of it might take them a really long time to go to that file that you ask them to open. And like that's just gonna get better over time. It's something that you just have to be patient with and they'll get there. So just, you know, take a deep breath when you're like, it's right there, just 2 files down. Just take a deep breath, they'll get there. And do code reviews. Again, this depends on like your team and what kind of structure you have, but you need some way to know if your junior is improving and they need some way to improve. So if you provide the option to do code reviews, and that might not be every time, they might have to ask for a particular review they want done or something, but by doing this, you're giving them a really obvious way to improve their code. But don't be super nitpicky about it. Like, you might have solved the problem a different way. Sometimes you're just gonna have to let it go. You know what, it's not the way I would have done it, but it works. I can read it, I understand. I'm just gonna let it go. So, you know, pick your battles. The point of these is to gradually improve their skills. You could throw in their notes like, oh, I would have done it this way, but this is good too, and just accept it anyway. So, you know, if it's not gonna be detrimental to how the code actually runs, if it's not hugely inefficient, then just let it go. You're there to help them gradually improve by doing these code reviews. You're not there to change every single line that they wrote. All right, and finally, with all of that in mind, with all of that admin I just added to your lives, why should you hire a junior developer if they're all this work? Well, I think that having a junior is a chance to really improve your processes. No one is going to point out flaws in your team like somebody who's never done this before. They're going to notice all the little hiccups and all the little bumps and all the little struggles. So this is a really good chance to figure out what those are and really streamline the process of getting someone onto your team and helping somebody to upskill. They're also going to ask you wild questions. This is something that people who mentor with us at SheCodes for the first time find really surprising. Like, you'll come out of a workshop with us and be like, I cannot believe somebody just asked me that. Like, I've never thought about it. And I've been teaching people to code for like 8 or 9 years, and I still, every single workshop I come out of it like, no one has ever asked me that before. So this is a really good chance for you to improve your processes and a really good chance for you to really test yourself on those as well and think, why do we do it that way? Because you will be asked some really unexpected questions. So on that note, it's really good for personal career development. So it's going to make you question your processes and maybe hopefully iterate on them. It's also going to really make you stop and think about how you write your code, because you'll do it one way and one day you'll be asked why and you'll think, I don't know, I've just always done it this way. Maybe I'm going to do some research and see if there is a better way to do this. I'm not sure. You're going to be asked a lot of wild questions. It's a really good way to improve and hone your own skills, become a lot better at the language or framework that you're using. It's also just really great to teach somebody else. Like, the best way to learn a skill is to try and teach it to somebody else. So this is going to help you improve your own skills as well. It's also just a lovely feeling teaching somebody else and watching somebody else grow and develop as well. So it's really good for morale as well. Another good reason for hiring juniors, and a slightly more shallow reason, is they haven't had a chance to develop any bad habits. And they're not super opinionated because they haven't had that chance yet. So you can teach them your bad habits, and you can teach them the opinions you believe in. You can shape them to work the way that you want them to work. You can shape them to match your team's methodology and the way that you write your code. Like, they're not going to have any strong opinions because they're going to, oh, you've been doing this for way longer than me. You must know what you're talking about, right? So, you know, you can really abuse that. It's one of those rare times where lack of experience could be extremely useful for you. It's also really good for our industry. So the diversity in our industry is atrocious, and I hope nobody here will disagree with that. So by hiring juniors, you're coming from a different pool. So there are a lot of people who are working really hard to work on this pipeline to get a more diverse group of people coming into our industry, which means the pool of juniors is way more diverse than the pool of mid or senior level developers. So if you hire a junior developer, you're going to have a way more diverse pool to pick from, which is really good for our industry. We're going to improve diversity. There's a ton of research that says having more diverse teams makes better products. But also, like, just great for our industry on a whole. It's great to stop us from stagnating if we have people coming through with new ideas and new connections and new backgrounds. It's just good. It's just good for all of us. There is a much bigger talent pool of juniors as well. So at the moment, the market is super atrocious and trying to hire a senior is ridiculously difficult. There are way more juniors available. And on that note, they're also so much cheaper. So there's a bit of an investment there in the early days, but you know, you could train a couple junior developers instead of hiring a senior if you have the time to do it. So you know, there's a good payoff there as well. But also, since it's so hard to get senior developers, clearly that means we need more of them. So we should be investing our time in the people that we have in our industry or are coming into our industry to help build that pool back up. On the flip side, there is a time when you shouldn't hire a junior developer, and that's if you're not prepared to put the time and effort into them. So you can't hire a junior, someone who's really new to this industry, give them a desk and a computer and just expect them to just start working perfectly from day one. Like, that is not how the system works. So it even takes a mid or a senior some time to, you know, get up to speed with how your team works, and yet a junior takes longer. So if you're not prepared to put the time and effort into their development and to helping them understand how your team works and how to program, then it's probably not a good time to hire them. So that won't be a good experience for you or for them. So I've been through a ton of tips in this talk, which is stuff that I've learned over the last few years. I think this advice is useful for anybody, not just juniors. So even if you're helping the mid or senior on your team, you know, don't take their keyboard, ask them leading questions. It'd probably be a lot more amusing, to be honest. Imagine how fun it would be messing with your tech lead. Like, why do you think it works that way? Like, you could use these with people who aren't just juniors who are new to this industry. And the other point I want to raise here is how much overhead does this really add? Well, the onboarding process, honestly, I think basically nothing. Like, you should just have a list of stuff for someone new to your team to go through anyway. You should have that checklist ready of all the stuff that they need access to. That stuff, if you haven't already done that, that's just a couple, you know, 1 hour meetings with some people on your team to just sit down and brainstorm and chuck it in, you know, Notion or Jira or Confluence, whatever you're using. Like that doesn't really change whether it's a junior or a senior that you're hiring. Over the long term, yeah, it does add a bit more overhead. So they do need a bit more time invested into them. So that is something to consider, and why I put a note there. If you don't have the time or effort to put into them, then it's not the right time. It does add a little bit more overhead. But again, it's super cheap. It's good for our industry. You'll probably get a lot more like diverse thinking and ideas coming in. There's a lot of reasons why you would hire them. So in this talk, we went over your role as a mentor, how to be an effective mentor, so you know, mitts off keyboards, that one I really care about. Supporting a junior developer as a team and why you should hire them. And with that in mind, again, I'm from SheCodes, we're always looking for mentors, so if you'd like to practice these new skills, then please hit us up on socials or just Google SheCodes Australia. We also have a network of junior developers. We have a 6-month bootcamp kicking off in like 6 weeks, realizing how soon that is, which means that in 7 months, we're gonna have 23 new junior developers all looking for jobs. But also we have a huge network of juniors as well. So we have a massive Slack channel of people who are new to the industry, largely in Perth, but also all around Australia, who are always looking for roles. So if you wanna hire a junior, then please get in touch so that you can join our Slack channel and see if you can meet some new people that way. Anyway. Thank you so much for listening to my talk. I'm Hayley. Hit me up on Twitter, or hopefully I'll see you at a SheCodes workshop sometime soon.